Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Maverick Mindset Radio Show. I am Adam Williams.
And I'm Ashley Muckenhop.
And this is the radio show for the dreamers and doers. It's for those who are willing to step into the arena.
Some call us the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers.
We don't accept the status quo. We leave the world better than we find it.
We approach each day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. We maintain a rational optimism about the future.
This is the Maverick Mindset Radio Show, brought to you by me, Adam Williams. I don't even know what episode number we're on right now, and it doesn't really matter. We are wasting no time today because we have arranged a really special guest to any listener of this show, you will be familiar with the name. So today we've got David Neagle with us from Life Is Now. David, welcome to the Maverick Mindset Radio Show.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor. I've been called all those names too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about it this morning as we were getting ready. I imagine that a lot of the things that you're going to talk about today are really familiar themes to our listeners. But what they'll find is that you say things that are similar to things that I say, but you say them in a very different way. And to people like Ashley, your softer, kinder, gentler approach, they're often more receptive to that than my abrasive, in your face, more aggressive approach. Although you have the ability to play both sides of that coin. So welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you here. Let's introduce David really quick, Ashley, and then just jump right into this because we are going to pack a ton of really good content into our 55-minute show.
Okay, David, I'm really excited to have you on here too. I told Adam I have to tone down like my fangirl. I was so excited. But anyways, we have David Neagle. He is a speaker, best-selling author, founder of the multi-million-dollar global consulting company, Life Is Now, and host of the Business Daily News ranked podcast, The Successful Mindset. And there's so much more. I feel like I could go on. So that's a short version of David Neagle.
Yeah, that's just great. To give the background, Jackie and I started working with David in 2019. I started, and our first in-person with David together was February of 2020. And the timing could not have been any more perfect because we all know what happened a month after that and really started working with him a lot more intensely. So David, just give us an idea of the type of work that you do. What type of people do you help, and how'd you get started doing this?
Okay, the type of work that I do is we help small to medium business owners achieve their dreams, really. Like if that's where we focus in the most. I've helped everybody from every kind of background, people that aren't business owners, people that are massive business owners. But we really focus in that, like, our niche market is the small to medium-sized business owner. And we start off working with them with mindset, because all success starts with the ability to think successfully. We are not taught that. We're not born with it. In fact, we're usually taught the exact opposite of that, which is just how to survive or how to be safe in life based on really kind of crazy ideas. But the way that this started for me was in the 80s. I quit high school when I was 17 years old. I just wanted to go to work. I did not jive with school at all. I was never a good student. And I couldn't stand the environment. It just rubbed me the wrong way. So as soon as I got to the age where I could quit, I was out. And then I went to work, and I was working labor jobs, basically. I worked at McDonald's for 4 years, from like 15 to 19. I worked in warehouses. I learned how to drive a forklift. I learned how to drive a truck. Those kinds of jobs. Worked for UPS for a while. In the late 80s, I worked for Metropolitan Life for about 1 year and 3 quarters. And it was my first introduction to any kind of self-improvement. I was introduced to Earl Nightingale's Lead the Field. It had just come out the year before, actually, which really dates me. And I listened to it, and I was also introduced to Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which made no sense to me at the time, absolutely none. I couldn't relate to it in any way. So we had the savings and loan crisis in 1989. And the first thing everybody did was they dropped things that they didn't feel that they needed. And and I was actually doing okay selling life insurance, but I lost all my policies in a matter of about 3 months. I mean, everybody dropped them. So I couldn't keep up. The only other skill I had was to go back to a warehouse, and I was driving a forklift. And at this point in time, we proceeded to lose everything. It started off with our car being repossessed. We couldn't pay the rent on our house. We had to move to a bad neighborhood about 60 miles away. We were on food stamps. We filed bankruptcy. It just kept getting worse. And I could not find a job to save my life that paid me any kind of money to get me out of the situation. So this is going on for 2 years. And for 2 years, I'm thinking, okay, how did I end up here? Like, this is horrific. I had 2 kids and I was married. Didn't think I mentioned that. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I be a better husband, a better father, because this is not what I want to be in life. And we thought, okay, well, if you hadn't quit high school, you wouldn't be in this situation. So I thought, okay, the answer is I have to go back to school. No internet at that time. You have to go right to a school, go and take night classes. So I said, what do I need to do that? I need more money and I need more time. I was already working 6.5 days a week. And I was not making enough I mean, we were on food stamps. I were obviously not making enough. So I'm trying to figure out every way that I can to, in my spare time, which was very little, to make some money. I came up with all kinds of ideas. Nothing worked. Didn't make any more money. At about the 2 year mark, I went into work one day. I was exhausted. I hated what I did. My attitude was terrible. I felt humiliated by the results that I wasn't getting. And before I even punched in on the clock, I got reprimanded twice because my work was terrible. I get in a screaming match with the boss as if it's his fault, right? Right? But
It's always somebody else's fault.
yeah, it was always somebody else's fault. So I start working. The guy that's supposed to work on the dock with me that night, he doesn't show up. I'm trying to do everything myself. We've got pallets of, it was a food import company, the largest in the country. Pallets of food are falling over. I can't keep up. Everybody in the warehouse is really ticked off at me because, it's slowing them down, right? Which means that they're going to have to work all night. It was just crazy. And I pulled it, and I had a big pallet of food on a forklift, and I was driving into the truck to put it in there to load it. And just as I went up this little ramp, the whole thing just went, fell over. Anyway, I lost it at that point. I just started sobbing on the forklift, just crying. And I said, God, I don't know what to do. I'm completely lost. Show me something. I don't know. And I mean, I meant it with every fiber of my being. I needed help. And a voice in my head said, David, change your attitude. And I tell people this, even though it sounds kind of airy-fairy, it sounded like the voice was outside of me. I mean, I literally turned around on the forklift to like, is there somebody there? Like, where would that voice? It was so loud in my head. And I stopped what I was doing just for a minute. I started picking everything up and I'm thinking, what does this mean? Change my attitude. Well, long story short, I had been hearing this my whole life from school teachers, right? They would call my father or my mother in and say, he's doing terrible, right? But he's a smart guy. He has potential, but his attitude is awful. If he had a better attitude, he would do better in school. So I would go home, and my parents' answer to this was to ground me from one quarter to the next, my whole childhood. And it was like, go to your room. When you come home from school, go to your room and study. You can come out for dinner, then go back into your room till bedtime and study. But nobody ever taught me how to study. Nobody was checking to see if I was. I was supposed to just bring my grades up by the next quarter. Well, it never really happened. So I spent a lot of time being grounded. Anyway, the idea was that I had been hearing it. And for the first time, I asked myself, what does this mean? What is an attitude actually? And the guy that started this company, his story within the company was pretty legendary. He started it in his garage in a suburb of Chicago. And somehow that made me feel like I could relate to this guy, right? Like we were almost on the same level. It's at one point in time. And I said, what's the difference between him and the success that he has and me. And it came down to three things that I recognized. Number one, he must have loved what he did. Number two, he must have done really well. In other words, he did great work. And I knew, so I hated what I was doing, and I was not working to any kind of excellence because I was never really taught that. So I was working to go home. I didn't care. I was raised in a very Chicago-esque union mindset, which was do not do anything more than you're paid for. They're not paying you for anything more than that, right? They're after you. They don't care about you. You're a number, like all this negative stuff. And nobody actually ever said that to me, but I heard it from my parents and my grandparents growing up because they were all union workers. My father wasn't, but that's another story. So I said, what is it that he's doing? So he said, my mind went, he must have loved what he did. He must have done really great work. And I noticed something about this guy that I couldn't put my finger on until I started asking the question what the attitude was. And that was, he had one of the first partially automated warehouses in the country, in this industry. So he was forever giving tours of the warehouse. Other CEOs would come in and he would give these people tours. He would never walk past an employee without saying, hello, how's your family? How you doing? Anything we could do for you? Pat him on the back, whatever. Not a lot of time, but acknowledgement. And when I saw that, it was not clicking to me. This was the exact opposite of what I was taught successful people were.
Yeah.
So when I started thinking about the attitude thing, I thought, this guy treats everybody with respect no matter who they are. I'm going to start treating people with respect. Now, in all fairness to my parents, I was not taught to be a disrespectful person. I became that way because I was so angry. So I said, okay, I'm going to change these three things and I'm going to do it for a year. And my mind is going, this is the craziest thing you've ever thought of. Like you've had some stupid ideas, but this one's about the top of the cake. There's no way you're ever going to increase your income just by changing these three things. And I said, no, I'm gonna act like I love what I do everything to the best of my ability, and treat everybody with total respect. That's what I heard in my head. I couldn't deny that. And I've tried everything else. Nothing else is working. I might as well try this. So I decided the next day, right? I was working this out in my mind as I'm working that night, right? The next day when I get to work, this is the person that I'm going to become. And it was not easy, right? I had to really force myself to be this person. But in 30 days, my income tripled. And I was like, what? How can this possibly be? And I mean, I was stunned. I was shocked. Everybody around me was stunned and shocked. Nobody in my family made $62,000 a year, and I was making the equivalent of that. So I said, everybody said, you got lucky. Don't screw this up like you've screwed everything else up before. And I said to myself, no, this isn't luck. It just so happened that the one class that I was good at in school, all school, grade school and high school, was science. And I knew that, we studied things like Einstein and stuff like that. And I knew that there was no luck in the universe, and everything happened by strict laws. So I said, this isn't luck. I'm doing something to cause this. I just don't know what it is. So I started studying. I had to drive 100 miles to work one way every day. So 100 miles to work, 100 miles back. I was huge. I love music, right? But at that time in my life, I said, I'm getting rid of the music and I'm going to start getting tapes, cassette tapes of books on tape. I'm going to turn this into a place to learn. And I began to do this. I did this for 7 years, by the way, right? So I got Tony Robbins' personal power tapes when they first came out. I was listening to all the great biographies, everything I could get my hands on, and learning what exactly happened. After a couple of years of studying, which I still hadn't met my mentor yet, but after a couple of years of studying, what I realized was when I changed my attitude, it changed my perception. Because here's what I couldn't get over. The opportunity for me to increase my income to triple it had been around me for 2 years, and I didn't see it. I didn't see it as an opportunity because my attitude was so terrible, right? There was a guy, his name was Drew Batty. He lived in Whiting, Indiana. He would come in twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And he delivered diesel fuel to our trucks and the refrigerated trailers that we had. Part of my job was to give him a manifest on what was loaded for the week so that he could put the fuel in there.
Yep.
And then, so we got to know each other, right? We're talking, that type of thing. He knew I was trying to find a job driving a truck. Now, here was an interesting thing back in the day. I don't know if it's still the same. If you could figure out how to get a truck driving license, in order to get a good job driving a truck, which it actually paid well back then, you had to have 5 years of experience. No company would hire you without 5 years of experience.
Hmm.
Where do you get 5 years of experience when nobody will hire you, right? You have to drive working basically like $4 an hour, which was less than I was making. I couldn't do it. I needed something that paid a little bit more, but I had no experience. So the whole catch-22 thing. So every once in a while, Drew would say to me, "Did you find that truck driving job yet? Did you find?" And I'd be like, "No, no." So this day he comes in. This is about a week and a half after I changed my attitude. He comes in and he says, when are you going to get out of this place?" I said, "Drew, I can't find a job to save my life when it comes to driving a truck. Nobody will hire me. I don't have any experience." He says, "Why don't you come to work for us?" And my mind instantly, I forgot that I was changing who I was, and I went into judgment, David.
Yeah.
Okay. And I said to him, "Dude," I'm like, "come on." I started laughing at him, like literally laughing at him, like condescendingly. I said, "You drive a bomb." He starts laughing. He goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You carry gas and diesel fuel, right?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "It is a bomb on wheels." And I go, "Has anybody ever died driving one of those things, like tipped it over or something and it blows up?" And he goes, "Yeah. Last year there was a guy driving down I-65. We don't know why he flipped the truck, but he flipped it and he burned to death." And I'm like, that's my point. You're driving a bomb. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yep.
And he said, "No." He said, "You have to understand, there's no more accidents any different than anything else." He said, it's usually always driver's fault." I didn't want to hear it. And I'm going all through these different things that I had been compiling for 2 years about judging this guy. You smell like diesel fuel. At least I have a roof over my head. I'm on a dock. You're out there when it's 20 below zero in Chicago, 4 feet of snow, or it's 98 degrees and humid with mosquitoes in the summertime out in the yard, or it's pouring rain. I'm like, at least I'm on a dock, like I'm some kind of elevated person or something. And he's just cracking up. And the last thing I said to him was, I said, "Drew, besides that, how much could you possibly be making?" My thought, because of my judgment, was that he was making less than me. I was thinking this is one of those $6 an hour truck driving jobs. And he says to me, "Well, last year I made 50." And I said, "You did not. Get out of here." He said, "I'll bring you my check stub next week." I said, "You do that. You bring me your check stub." I'm like, there's no way this guy made 50 grand. He brought it to me on next Tuesday, and he did. So I go into rethinking everything that I just said. And I'm like, this is an opportunity. I said, "What's the downside?" He said, "Well, there is a downside." He said, "We're a union company, as you know, which is why they paid so much more." He said, "The downside is that you'll be on the bottom of the seniority list." He said, "Now, 80%, 70 to 80% of our business in Chicago is construction." He said, "So when the ground freezes in the late fall, we lose a ton of business over the winter." I was very familiar with that. My grandfather was a construction worker. So I grew up with understanding they'd be on compensation, workers' comp all winter long, whatever. I said, "Well, how long would I get laid off for?" He said, "It depends." He said, "It could be a month." He said, "It could be 7 months if it's a really bad winter." He said, "It all depends." So I went home and I'm talking to my wife about this. And I said, "You know something? I know for a fact I can get another job doing what I'm doing on a dock. But this might be a way out if we can figure out how to get through the layoff period." So we went back and forth in a very short period of time. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to do it." So I went there. You had to take a road test. You had to take a written test. You had to go through interview with the people in the company. And I got the job. And a week later, I'm making the equivalent of 62,000, partially because they paid an extraordinary hourly wage because they were a union company.
Yep.
They carried hazardous materials, so you got extra money for that. A lot of it was labor work because you would drive to a place where you're going to deliver fuel, but then you had to pull out this huge long hose and go truck to truck to truck or on top of real tall construction equipment. There was a lot of labor involved. which is why most people didn't want that job as a truck driver.
Yeah.
So it was like they would take almost anybody that they can get that had a license that was a hard worker. And I'm like, I got that part down. So it was, it gave me that lift. A year later, I had our first house. We dug ourselves out of all the debt. Everything was going great, and I was studying. And then in 1996, by chance, I met Bob Proctor, who then became my mentor. But in the 7 years that I worked for that company, I started off as a truck driver, and when I left, I was in charge of expanding that company across the country, and I never went back to school. All I did was keep increasing my attitude and learning what it was that I was doing. So that's kind of a long-winded version, but that's the story, and that's how it happened. And I realized that you didn't need all these other things that you need to change. You didn't need the money, you didn't need the time. You needed to change who you are first, and all of the other stuff shows up because it's already there.
I've heard that story so many times and it's still really engaging to me. And what I find so interesting is it ties in so many other lessons that you teach. So for example, for what did you say? For 2 years, this guy was coming and filling up these
Yes,
trucks, and this
yes,
opportunity was there, and you didn't even bother to see that opportunity.
nope,
And then finally the opportunity comes up, and now you've got all these reasons and all these stories and all these other choices that you're making. I'd rather have a roof than make the extra money. But then at some point you say, you know what? I need the money, and I'm going to make the decision to drive a bomb and
yeah,
stand out in the cold and deal with bugs. But I'm making that decision, that trade-off in order to make the money that I really want to be making. So it's really interesting how that ties into so many of the other stories and lessons that you teach. So I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about or make sure that we talked about today, and we talked about this a little bit in preparing for the show, and I think it relates to that story, is there's this mind money connection, right?
yeah.
And it's you, I don't remember the phrase that you just used, but I always say it sounds a little woo-woo, right? That the by changing your mindset and changing your identity and can change your income really.
100%.
So let's talk a little bit about how your thinking can sabotage your income. The other thing I really relate to with your story, and a lot of our listeners will relate to as well, is, we're in Erie, Pennsylvania. That is a blue collar Rust Belt town that for years and years and years has really been reliant on those union jobs that
Yep.
now don't exist at nearly the level that they ever did.
No.
So you talked about what you're taught about what successful people do or what they are, or what they look like, and we've got an identity crisis in our town for exactly that reason. Is successful people are perceived as bad, or they are taking advantage of people, or don't put in any extra effort because they don't really care about you. So let's talk about this a little bit of how can we start changing our thinking and then really as a result of that be more successful or make more money or however you want to
Right.
define success.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning here. The first thing is to really begin to understand that we were not raised, nobody in our educational system, nowhere teaches anybody how to earn money. The most important thing that we need to learn in order to be self-sufficient as adults is we have to learn how to earn money. What they teach us is how to go to work and trade our life for money, right? The school system, which was developed in the late 1800s in Chicago, by the way, was designed to prepare people for the Industrial Revolution, right? To come out and be able to work factory jobs. And it's never changed. The whole intention behind it is exactly just to prepare people to work. So they teach you all kinds of things, but the two major things that they don't teach you that you need to take control of your own life is number one, how to actually make a decision based on what you truly want, and how to earn the money to be able to create the life that you want. They leave that completely out of the equation. And they put you in a position where you have to adapt to what other people want in order to be safe and to keep your job. I don't care how educated you are. Most people are working for somebody else, and it's like, even if you don't want to admit it to yourself, that somebody else is in control of your income. You could go to work any day and they could say it's over. The company could go out of business. It happens all the time. Somebody might not like you. There might be nepotism in the company. You got competition. Somebody at the bottom wants to take you out so that they could take your position. Like
Or I think a really big fear now is AI is going to take my job,
a
depending on the
hundred
job.
percent,
Yeah.
100%. And there's a big reality to that, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that we've never been taught what we need to know in order to be able to create the money. I tell people all the time, and Adam, you've heard me say this probably a million times, anybody can take their annual income and turn it into a monthly income. And they can do it this month. They have the ability to do it. They just don't know how. So I'll make this statement to all your listeners. This will probably, really trigger them. But here's the truth. Everybody on the planet has the same amount of money. Everybody. I don't care where you are. I don't care what your situation is. We all have the same amount of money. And here's the reason why. Every dollar that you will earn futuristically is all in the same place for every person. It's in the hands of somebody else. If I understand how to move that dollar from their hands to my hands, which is exactly what money was intended to do, right? It's a tool, is all that it is, in order to extend service beyond our physical presence and to make our life better. If I understand how to do that without trading my life for it, excuse me, in other words, working for somebody else, I am the master of how much money that I bring in. And that's a skill set that anybody can learn. It's also an awareness. But think about this for those of you that are listening to this. When you hear me say that, listen to the voice in your head that's trying to disagree with it. And ask yourself, what is that based on? That's based on everything that you've been told about money and about people and about their experiences, where they live, the hardships that they're having, that's actually not accurate, right? Yes, there are people that are in terrible situations. Some people live with oppressive governments, right? Some people live in places where there's no education. They're carrying water on their head for 12 miles every day just to be able to give water for their village. It doesn't matter where you are or what it is that you're doing. The money is there for you if you but know how to attract it and how to bring it into your life. So that's where it starts. If you understand that you've been given a raw deal in the aspect of nobody tells you how to do this, yet it's the most important thing you need, hopefully that's the impetus to start thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute. If what he's saying is true, if I learn how to actually bring money into my life, could I actually live what I really want? And then the last piece to this, now let's turn it back over to you, is we're never taught to ask ourselves what it is that we truly want in life. We're taught the opposite. You can't have everything that you want, right? You're taught you don't need that. Money doesn't grow on trees, right? Be satisfied with what you have. Don't be greedy. Don't be selfish. It's all the opposite of what it requires for you to be able to attract money to you. So money for most people in their mind is a double-edged sword. Yes, it's necessary, but too much is evil. And we have a split thing about money. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with over the last 26 years who as soon as they start to make more money, they feel guilty. They feel ashamed. They feel like they're being selfish. They go through all these emotional gyrations because of what they were taught for so long. And never are they asking themselves, what do I really want in my life? Because they think it's the wrong question to ask. So when you ask anybody, and I also teach this when I teach advanced sales to people, when you sit across from somebody and you look them in the eye and you say, let me ask you a question. Tell me what you really want. You're asking the most intimate question you could ever ask of another human being because nobody asks them that question. When I met my mentor, he didn't say this directly to me, but I was sitting in a seminar and he stood on the stage and he said, if you could tell me what you want, I can show you how to get it. And Earl Nightingale told that to Proctor. And I tell that to the people that I work with. If you can tell me what you want, I can show you how to get it, because the getting of anything happens by exact laws. If you know those laws and you can incorporate them into accurate thinking and then combine the correct behaviors with it, there's no limit to the amount of money that you can make. Remember, I was a high school dropout. I had no education. We lost everything. And in a very short period of time, I became a multimillionaire with a multi-million-dollar business and working with people all over the world to help them do the exact same thing. And people will say, well, how many of the people that you work with actually get those results? Everyone. Everybody that I work with that does exactly what we show them how to do gets those results, bar none, for 26 years. Now, there are people that have said, I don't believe this. I'm going to, I'm out of here. That's 100% true. But the people that do work with us and do what we show them how to do, I mean, the amount of testimonials that we have and the people that come up and say, this guy and what he taught completely changed everything. It's an extraordinary amount of people. The same as I'm grateful for the guy that taught me how to do. Like my life's totally different because I met Proctor and I worked with him for 7 years. Everything in my life changed because of that guy. So anyway, I'm going over.
I probably know hundreds of millionaires that you've helped create,
Yeah.
helped them to become millionaires. And I don't know of any, I mean, Tony Robbins is in that category, and I'm sure there are a handful of others, but I think that's a really important thing is you've been at this for 30 plus years,
Yeah.
right? And when your journey starts as a cassette tape and
Yeah.
listening to cassette tape to now being on our radio show, of course. I mean, I think you've got the chops and the testimonials and the proof of this, that there's a whole bunch of wannabes out there on the internet now that think they can teach this stuff and
Yeah.
that think they have the ability to do it, and they've come out of nowhere. Whereas you've got this, first of all, you're part of this tree, and I did a lot of work with Proctor as well, but you're part of this tree where you've learned and studied and demonstrated. But I think more importantly, you've shown other people how to do it and they've gone and done it. Like you've
Right.
actually created that. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of, there's a lot of coach people out there on the internet that, I have to be careful. This is the FM radio part of the show where I can't swear, but they don't really know what they're doing. They don't really understand what made them successful or what made them work.
Right.
But I think you found the success and then reverse engineered it and said, wow, here's what actually made that work for me. And I think studying that was I mean, it's really changed so many more lives than people will ever really
Well,
understand.
Adam, in all fairness, and I totally get this because I am very much the same way. Um, People fall in love with the material when they hear it because it resonates with their soul. But there's a big difference between hearing it and then applying it to your life and actually making the changes. Because when you're changing it, it's not just you're changing your mindset. Most people wake up to this information, excuse me, most people wake up to this information after they've already created a ton of responsibility in their life. And it's like, how do I turn that train around? Right? Because a lot of it was created out of necessity, not out of want, yet it's still there. So I've watched people really struggle with that idea. When I became a facilitator for Proctor in 1999, there were 250 people that became facilitators at the same time that I did. There's not one of them that's still around today because they were in love with the material, but they weren't in love with the change.
I think that's the one thing that you said is who becomes successful with my teachings. Everybody who does the work
Who
and who
does the
makes the
work?
changes, and that's a big asterisk. Is there's plenty of people that'll listen to every podcast and every book on tape and watch every YouTube video and even hire the coaches, but they'll never actually go and do the work and make the changes.
Right.
And that's the part that, again, I've been in this world, I guess, for 5 or 6 years now, and I've seen plenty of those people too, where they just jump from program to program to program, but
Yeah.
never actually do the things that they need to do. Okay, so you man dropped a lot of really good stuff there that I want to unpack a little bit more here. So let's start with, I love the concept, and I like to repeat this because I have to do math in my head. Making your annual income your monthly income.
Yeah.
Like really thinking about what that means to people. I think you're actually, it's a recent program that you just did. Was it called Becoming 12X? Was that the right?
Becoming 12X,
Yeah.
correct.
And
Yeah.
that's the idea of like 12 times where you are right now. And we talk about money and income, of course, but it's not always just about money and income. It's about every other measure of success that you have. But I want to talk a little bit about, you said everything that you need exists. So everything that you need to accomplish your goals or achieve what you want to achieve or get what you desire, it already exists out there in the world. And I think that this is, of three of the things that you said, one of the things that I really need to unpack is most of us are taught to have this lack mindset and not this abundance mindset. So how can people start to make that change or become more aware of the fact that yes, if I can decide what it is that I want, everything that I need to achieve that is out there in the world somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing thing because we are taught that we are taught a lack mindset and we're taught that there's lack. And because of that teaching, we can manipulate people all over the world to get them to do whatever it is that we want because we say that there's not enough. So it runs political movements and motivations. It runs businesses, all kinds, a lot of business is based on the idea that there's not enough. And because there's not enough, they try to sell you something different. Like there's all kinds of crazy tentacles that this thing has. But I had an experience when I worked for the petroleum company, by the way. I won't go into how long this story is because it's quite a long story, so I'll just cut it short. I had to go to the refinery one day because we had a problem. The problem was that they were telling everybody in the Chicagoland area and also major other cities that there was an oil shortage. So we were being limited with how much diesel fuel we could actually pull from the refinery. Well, I was a can-do guy. Like my customers, they are going to get their diesel fuel. So I was calling all the refineries in the Chicagoland area. Well, we had one that was literally down the street from us, but the guys that needed to pull the fuel were way up northern Chicago. So I didn't want them to drive down. I wanted to try to get it up there first. Forget it, I couldn't get it. So I said, I'm not going to call. I'm going down the street and I'm going to talk to these people and see what I can do. So I go in there. They're all having lunch. Now they knew who we were because we're right up the street, right? We buy product from them all the time. And I said, when do you guys think that we're going to have enough oil in order to make enough product? And they start laughing. And I'm like, what's so funny? And they said, you see all those round containers out there that hold fuel? Yeah. He said, they're all filled to the top. We couldn't make any more product right now if we wanted to. And I said, get out of here. He said, you don't realize this is all manipulation to lower or raise oil prices. I said, really? He said, yeah, 100%. He said, and the engineers are there. They said, we'll tell you something else that most people don't know. He said, you can believe what you want. He said, but I'll promise you one day, people will realize that this is the truth. He said, oil is a natural byproduct of the earth. He said, there's not a limited supply. The earth keeps making it over and over again. And I said, get out of here. I'm like, that was the craziest thing that I ever heard at the time. And he told me a story about the Kettleman Dunn oil well, which was one of the first major oil wells out in, I think it was in Texas. Might have been Pennsylvania, but I think it was Texas. Anyway, they had run that thing dry years ago. He said, do you know that it's half full again? I said, I didn't even know the well existed, so I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, I did some research and I found out that it was true, that it was half full again. Now, I carried that story with me for years. I didn't know whether it was true or not. But just recently, there have been scientists that are coming out and they're starting to tell people the truth that oil is a natural byproduct of the earth, that there's no limit of it. But I mean, in 1970, they said we had 20 years left of oil. I remember this, right? I was a kid. Everybody was freaking out. What are we going to do? We're not going to have cars. There's only 20 years left. But they tell you that to manipulate people. Anyway, I tell you the story to reinforce the idea that most of what we've been taught is complete BS when it comes to the idea that there is a lack. There is no lack. And in a wonderful book that Wallace Wattles wrote in 1903 called The Science of Getting Rich, he pointed out in that book that he said, now you can believe what you want, but he said, God will not let human beings go without anything that they need. If it is not there now, it will be created for them. which I completely believe because everything about our life, our existence, the universe is all about creation. It's all been created. If you look at humanity, when the first humans stepped foot and walked on this earth, we didn't have any of the things that we have now. It was just nature. Where did it all come from? It came from the ability to imagine something different and then figure out how to create it with your hands. But where did it exist before that? Because the knowledge had to be here or it couldn't be done. Well, all the knowledge that was ever created is 100% present in all places at the same time. That's an absolute law. If you tap into that knowledge, you can tap into the cause and effect, which is the number one law, and then you can create whatever it is that you want in life. So to understand everything's already here in the universal knowledge sense, we're as close to it as we can recognize it, right? So, excuse me, getting over a little cold. Um, if you desire something, you're on the same frequency as the thing that you want. Well, it has to be here to be on that frequency, right? And if you're on that frequency, it's already as close to you as your breath. You just can't see it because you haven't changed your perception yet. Once you see it, you can manifest it. And that's how every great inventor has manifested something. Steve Jobs could see this in his mind before he created it in real life, and it changed everything in the world. The same with every invention. So the idea is, where does this start? Asking yourself what you really want. Because one of the keys in order to get the success that I'm suggesting, or even if you work with somebody else, it doesn't matter. If you don't pick something that you seriously want, that you're really passionate about, you won't stick with it in order to manifest it. You will stop when it gets tough. And when it gets tough is never on the outside, it's always in here. It's always in your mind. That's the only place that we experience hard. It's a mindset. The truth is, you were born to be a success. Success is easy. It's not difficult. But the strategy that we were given for life is to work hard so we make things hard and then we struggle and suffer.
All right, so let's get into the what you truly want piece of it right now, because
Okay.
I had this experience yesterday, and I think that giving people a little bit of an awareness of this will be really helpful. When you ask people, what is it that you really want, right? What is it that you desire? We're not taught to even think about that.
Nope.
There are a handful of really common either verbal out loud responses that you get, or there's things that people are thinking but not saying, right? So you ask that question and they're going to say, well, it doesn't matter what I really want because I'm not worthy of it, or I can't get it, or it's not possible.
Right.
Um, or I had this experience yesterday, and I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are. I said, what is it that you really want? And this person said, I want a $1.2 million house. But she said it jokingly. She doesn't actually know what it means to have a $1.2 million house.
Yeah.
You don't know where it's located. You don't know how big it is. You don't know what the maintenance is going to be. Like, you don't, like, you're saying it just like you could
Yeah.
say, I want to make $10 million a year, but you don't really understand what that actually means.
Right.
So what you were talking about is, you don't, if you're not going to do the work that needs to be done, or you're going to give up if you don't really want that thing. So let's talk a little bit about, when you ask someone what is it that you really want, what are some of the paradigm shifts or the blockages that they have that they need to start to understand.
Good question. So generally, when somebody gets asked this question, the most common answer I get is, I don't know. That's what people look me right in the eye and they say, I just don't know. And I'll say, okay, here's where I want you to start. What do you know that you want right now that you're telling yourself no about? And that could be the simplest, silliest things in your life. Like somebody says, I would really like a new purse. No, I'm not going to do that right now. I can spend money on other things that are more important. I want a new car. No, I'm not going to do that. Think about all the small things that you might be saying that when you see it, you want it, but you're telling yourself no. The reason that we tell ourselves no is because the value priority that we were given as kids is how to, accept what it is that we want was based on need. So our mind goes, can I justify that? Nope, you can't, because you owe all these people money. Your credit cards are racked up. I won't do that right now. I'm going to do something else. Oh, what are you training your subconscious to do? Not let the true desire of your life come to the surface. Because if you won't say yes to what's in your life right now, you'll never say yes to what you're really here to do, your true value and your true purpose. So I tell people, start where you are. Start saying yes to the small things that you might think are stupid or silly. But as you say yes, you're going to open something up inside of yourself that's in every human being, and that is the reason and the purpose that you're here. And it won't be for $1 million house. $1 million house is great, but it's a situation. What people really want is they want to feel secure, they want to feel fulfilled, they want to spend their days doing, loving what they do, they want to live a life of adventure. Those are the things that they really want. Everything else is superficial. And I don't say superficial in a bad way, I say superficial in an easy way. If you start to figure out those things in the front end, everything else is an effect. You'll get all the rest of the stuff. But even with that, people will still come to me and say, yeah, okay, what I really want to do is I want to make 1 million, or I want to make 500,000, or I want to buy the car, I want to take the trip, or whatever. It's like, okay, we'll start wherever you are. And I'll show them exactly what to do to earn the amount of money that they want. And if they do it, they will earn that money. Now, do they all get to the place where they go, oh my God, I can't believe how easy this is? And they start to readjust what they want? Everyone that I've ever experienced it with, including myself. Because once you realize money is so easy to earn, you go through phases. The first phase is usually you're angry. Like, why didn't somebody teach me this earlier? This is nuts that it's this easy. And then you go through the phase where you want to buy everything that you never thought you'd be able to buy. That doesn't usually last too long because then you realize, oh, I can buy whatever I want, whenever I want. I don't have to run out and grab it. So that impulse starts to go away. And then you start thinking to yourself, how do I really want to create my life now that I know that I can to be exactly what makes me happy and what is it that I want to do?
So you're saying start where you are. It may be that
Yeah.
purse. It may be the adding the cheese to your hamburger that normally the
Yeah.
49 cent price would have completely been off-putting to you.
Right.
So that initial question of what is it that you want, the most common answer that you're saying is I don't know. But what other types of excuses are people making for not actually deciding what they want or not actually achieving that?
What other people think about them if they actually wanted something. So the number one, the people have asked me many times, what's the number one reason that you see people fail? They're in business now. Okay. So like I'm working with a lot of business owners. The number one thing is that they're in a relationship with somebody that doesn't want to grow. And all they get is severe pushback on the fact that they want to grow and change their life. That is an extremely difficult position to be in. Okay. I was in that position in my life at one point. And because you're intimately involved with somebody and you love them and you care about them, you want also to meet their needs and what they want, but all of a sudden you find out that you've got a value conflict in the relationship. And that means that you don't want the same things. Now, hopefully that can be reconciled because we're not talking about anything that's bad or nasty or not healthy or whatever. We're talking about the value of personal growth, which everybody should have, right? Like personal growth should be like on the top of your value list as an adult. But the truth is, a lot of people don't want it. It scares them. It really terrifies them. I know one woman that was dating a really great guy, and the guy has dreams. They're a young couple. The guy has dreams and enthusiasm and all kinds of energy and really wants to create something wonderful. And her response to everything about how he's trying to think is, that's not how my parents taught me it was. So he's like, well, let's go to a different church. Let's go to a different speaker. Let's find something that you gel with. And every place they would go, that's not what my parents taught me life was about. So anything outside of that paradigm, she wasn't budging. And she finally said, look, I have no desire to grow. I'm happy with life just the way that it is. And on top of that, she would constantly say to him, can you stop this studying and growing? Like it's causing all this trouble in our relationship. So this is a big issue. It's the number one issue that I see because, like I said a few minutes ago, the idea is that usually people wake up after they've already been in a relationship. Maybe they got kids. They've got they're working for somebody else. They've created a bunch of responsibility, and now they got to figure out how to change it. So that's one of the big ones. Fear is another one. Fear of loss, but usually it's fear of shame and guilt. What happens if I make a mistake or this doesn't work? I don't want to be disappointed. That's huge. I hear it all the time, right? But again, they're operating with information that is completely incorrect. It was designed to keep them rooted in a lie. And the lie is that there is no safety, right? People say, I want to do this because it's safe. I want to do this because it's safe. I want to put this money here, stay here, be with these people, whatever. Safety does not exist as a destination. It's not a destination, it's a way of being. In other words, is it that there's threats out there in the world? Of course there is. But what keeps you safe is, can you actually think through the problem? It's not that you get to a place where there is no more threat or no more challenge. That place doesn't exist. But people have been sold over and over and over again that it does exist. And you see it all the time in marketing and advertising, right? Do the safe thing. Don't take a risk. Invest with us. Get this insurance. On and on and on. There is no safe place. It doesn't exist. And when you understand that, which is frightening at first, but you start thinking to yourself, really, based on the law of cause and effect and the law of polarity, everything that I need is always available exactly when I need it. And I can access that if I understand how to critically think. If I can do that, there's no need to be in a safe place because I can create what I need no matter what the issue is. And that's a big pill for a lot of people to swallow because we see so many people go by the wayside in disasters
Yep.
because they don't know how to think, right? And that's not uncaring, that's just facts. That's just the way that it is. The universe doesn't care that you don't know, right? It's exact with every form of life that there is. That's the way that it is.
I think that's actually it's interesting because we spend a lot of time talking about that in our business, that like the safety and security versus the big company that you could go and work for, that the moment something negative happens, you're laid off, they're letting staff go,
Right.
whatever. Like that, the safety doesn't come from someone else providing it to you. The safety comes from your ability to go out and find or create or acquire what it is that you want or what you need. So I think we've only got a few minutes left, but there was one other thing that you mentioned
Two
that I really
minutes.
2 minutes. All right, I really dig into this a little bit. What about going and getting the thing? You don't need that, right? It's more than you need. So the bigger house, the nicer car, the purse, the need versus the want versus the desire versus maybe being selfish. How
Yeah.
do people get over that?
Well, the first
Do they
thing
need
is we should be selfish. It's our life. We should put ourselves first in everything. And that does not mean take away from somebody else by any means, right? It doesn't mean not care for somebody. It doesn't mean do not do things for other people. What it means is that it's your life. You should be designing it the way you want to live it and be the very best that you can because you have more to give to everybody else when you do it. More to your kids, more to your spouse, more to your friends, more to your business, more to the world itself because you're developing yourself first. The idea of what do we want is inherent in all of nature. It's what keeps all of nature moving forward. We're not supposed to be satisfied. We're supposed to be creating our life and have it ever expanding. That's how all life expands. But the guilt and shame that are put in people's minds because maybe your parents couldn't supply your desires, but they didn't teach you how to go out and get what you want for yourself, right? I mean, I have four children and they're split by 10 years right down the middle. Like two very early and two later when I had more money. They had very different experiences growing up, right? But even with the ones that were born after or not born after, but were growing up during the time that I became a millionaire, they didn't get everything. Every one of my kids knows how to work and get exactly what it is that they want because I taught them the cause and effect of it. I didn't just give it to them, right? Because then
Yep.
that develops entitlement. So, but my encouragement to them is I don't care what you do. Go out there and do exactly what you want. Don't stop till you become it and get it. And that's what everybody should do. That's why we're here.
I love it. That's so good.
David Nagel gave me permission to be selfish.
That's right.
Selfish
100%.
LB.
Yeah, but again, without taking from others,
I'm
right?
not going to
No,
be a jerk.
Yeah.
no,
I know that.
because you being selfish expands everything. Proctor used to say
Yeah.
it this way: selfishness is not being what you want to be. It's asking or expecting other people to be what you want them to be.
Yeah.
He said that's selfish.
All right. Well, this has been really good stuff. Anybody looking for more information on David Nagel, we could have gone on for hours and hours
Oh,
and
yeah.
hours. Lifeisnowinc.com, the Successful Mind podcast. How often are you putting out podcast episodes, David?
Once a week.
Okay, so
Once
once
a
a
week.
week. I mean, you have episodes that you've put out that I've gone back and listened to over and over and over again because the information is so good and so helpful. You've got a ton of free resources available at your website of lifeisnowinc.com. Any other parting thoughts or words of wisdom for us before we wrap this thing up?
What I would leave everybody with to walk away is to ask yourself, what do you really want? Because it's your life and that's why you're here. What you want benefits the world. So selfishness benefits everybody in the world. It doesn't take away from it, right? Because you're able to give more. So what you want is also very necessary in the world that you're living in and during the time you're living in. So go for it.
We love it. David, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This show all over the place. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom and frankly, all that you've done for my business and my family.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
Thanks, David.